Okay, the last section of 5.1 notes is some examples using the exponent rules. For example, 3a, this one, we have a mixed number in parentheses raised to the power of 2. Applying an exponent to a mixed number can be kind of confusing and a lot of process. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the 5 1/2 into an improper fraction first. So when you have an improper fraction, what we're going to do is take the whole number and multiply it by the base. Basically what we're doing is we're taking 5 wholes that we have to make up that number, and we're splitting them into halves. So instead of 5, we would have 10 halves. And then we also had that 1/2 from the other part that we are working with. So now instead of having just 5 1/2, we would have 11 halves. So what we're doing is taking 5 times 2 to get 10, and then we're adding that to the numerator to get 11. So that gives us 11 over 2 raised to the power of 2. And as we talked about in the previous video, we have to do 11 squared and 2 squared, which gives us, 121 over 4. Now, this part of the test will be no calculator, so the numbers are going to be smaller like this, where if you have to evaluate, they should be numbers that you know off the top of your head. And if not, you can work them out on the side if you need to, but it is no calculator. Okay. So then for example B, for this one, inside parentheses, we have a fraction, and then we have a negative exponent on the outside. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the negative exponent. And to do that, we're just going to take everything in the numerator, put it in the denominator, so that x cubed y squared is now in the denominator, and then everything that was in the denominator is going to the numerator. So we would have 2x to the power of 4. And now the exponent becomes positive. Then that exponent is going to be applied to everything in the parentheses. So it's applied to the 2, it's applied to the x on the top and the bottom, and the y. So we would have 2 squared, and when we have a power to a power, we multiply. So we have x to the power of 4 raised to the power of 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. Then on the bottom, x to the power of 3 raised to the power of 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And then y to the power of 2 raised to the power of 2 would be y to the power of 4. Okay, anytime you have numbers with an exponent, you are expected to evaluate those. So 2 to the power of 2 is 4. And then we have more x's on top, so I'm going to take the ones on the bottom and subtract that from the top. So that's going to give us x to the power of 2. And we only have y's on the bottom, so that's going to stay on the bottom to the power of 4. And that's our answer. You'll know you're done simplifying when you don't have any negative exponents. The fraction coefficients, so any of the numbers on the top and the bottom, can't be simplified anymore. And then also you don't have any variables that are the same in the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so then for C, we have a fraction raised to the power of 7, and all of that is raised to the power of 0. Now, it's nice because anything raised to the power of 0 equals 1. So it doesn't matter what is inside these brackets, because it's all raised to the power of 0, this will equal 1. Okay. So then for example D, when you have a fraction times a fraction, the first thing I would recommend is multiplying them together first, and then worry about your negative exponents and your simplifying. So when you multiply them, you multiply like parts together. So we multiply coefficients together. So negative 2 times 2 would be negative 4. And then you multiply the same variables together. So we have x squared times x to the negative 1. So we keep the base at the exponents, and that comes out to 1. Same thing on the bottom. We multiply coefficients together. So we have a 6. Then we multiply like variables, but there's only one x, so the x stays the same. And then we have y cubed times y to the negative 1. So when you multiply with the same base, you keep the base, add the exponents. 3 plus negative 1 is 2. Okay, now that we have one fraction, we can worry about simplifying. So first we're going to look at the coefficients, And with these, you're treating it just like a normal fraction. Can you divide both the top and the bottom by the same thing? And both of these can be divided by 2. That would simplify to then a -2 over 3. Now I'm going to look at the x's. So I have the same amount of x's on the top and the bottom. So those are going to cancel out with each other because x divided by x is 1. So if we had a -2 times 1, it's still going to be -2. So I don't need to put anything else for that. And then we have just our y squared on the bottom. That's not going to simplify with anything. So it stays where it is, y squared. That's our answer. Now, even though this 2 is negative, it's not a negative exponent. So we're just going to leave it there. So the only thing you can't have is a negative exponent. You can have a negative coefficient. All right, for example E, same thing for this one as it is with multiplying fractions. We're going to multiply like parts together. So we're going to multiply coefficients with each other. So 2 times 2 is 4. Then we're going to multiply like variables. So x cubed times x to the -1. And 3 plus -1 is 2. Then we have y to the -4 times y to the 5, which would be y to the 1. Now this is completely simplified because it's not a fraction. There are no more negative exponents, so we are good. Okay, I would recommend pausing and trying this last one on your own, and then checking your answer at the end of the video. Okay, so for this one, the first thing I'm going to do is apply this exponent on the top to get rid of the parentheses. So that's going to bring us to 2 squared. And x squared raised to the power 2 would be x to the 4. Y cubed raised to the power 2 would be y to the 6. And z raised to the power 2 is z squared. Now the bottom just stays the same for now. Okay. So now for my answer, I'm going to simplify 2 squared because I know that's going to equal 4. The 3 on the bottom is just going to stay the same. There's nothing I can divide 4 and 3 by that would simplify it, so those are good. They're simplified. Then if I look at my x's, there are more x's on top, so I'm going to take away the ones on the bottom from the top, and that's going to give us x squared. So there are more on top. My simplified answer should be on the top for that. Same thing for the y's. There are more y's on top, so I'm going to take away the ones on the bottom from the top, and that becomes y to the power of 4. Now for the z's, there are more z's on the bottom, so I'm going to take away the z's on the top from the z's on the bottom. So my z's will stay on the bottom because that's where there were more of them, and that would be z squared. Now we are done simplifying because 4 and 3, those are completely simplified. There are no negative exponents, and there are no variables that are the same in the top and the bottom. So that means it is completely simplified. If you have questions on these, let me know, and don't forget to complete the homework.